The sound of wind whipping against a boarded-up diner window, followed by the dry crunch of tumbleweeds dragging across cracked asphalt, is the official anthem of the American ghost state. You haven't been told the truth about these empty places. The tourism boards want you to believe that these vast, unpopulated regions are just quirky, untouched frontiers waiting for adventurous retirees to claim their slice of quiet freedom. That is a fabricated illusion. These states did not just naturally clear out because people prefer the city. They were systematically hollowed out by corporate agricultural consolidation, the complete collapse of rural healthcare networks, and local governments hiking property taxes on a shrinking base of seniors just to keep the streetlights on. You are not looking at untouched nature. You are looking at economic containment zones where the middle class was quietly starved out of existence. No myths, no filters, just reality. We are counting down the 10 emptiest states in the country, exposing exactly why the math stopped working for the people who stayed behind. The top 3 on this list are absolute financial nightmares. But the state at number 1 is bleeding residents so fast that its own municipal leaders are panicking, and you might be packing your bags to move there right now. Number 10, Kansas. Imagine paying premium property taxes to live in a zip code where the nearest emergency room just chained its doors shut. The brochures sell you on endless horizons and dirt-cheap real estate, completely omitting the fact that rural Kansas is currently experiencing a catastrophic medical collapse. According to a 2026 report by The Beacon, 30 rural hospitals in Kansas are at immediate risk of closure right now. Backing that up, a 2025 healthcare study revealed that over half of the hospitals in the state are operating at a massive financial loss. This is not just a minor inconvenience for a younger family, but a lethal financial trap for anyone on a fixed income with a medical history. You might save $40,000 on a house, but if your heart stutters on a Tuesday night, the ambulance ride is going to cost you precious hours that you simply do not have. The smell of dry dust and diesel exhaust hangs heavy in the dead, silent air of town squares that used to support 3 local clinics and now have absolutely none. As one exhausted local put it on a neighborhood forum, "We finally got the county to buy a new ambulance, but we have to drive 50 miles just to find a hospital that is legally allowed to admit us." The state is empty because the infrastructure required to keep human beings alive is quietly being dismantled. And while the rusted silos of Kansas show what happens when healthcare vanishes, the artificial scarcity waiting at our next stop proves that sometimes the government itself is the reason you cannot afford to live there. Number 9, Nevada. From 30,000 feet, the desert looks like a vast, completely free playground of endless opportunity. On the ground, it is a suffocating, engineered federal monopoly. People assume Nevada is empty simply because it is a harsh desert, but the brutal macroeconomic reality is far more restrictive. According to 2025 data from the Governor's Office of Economic Development, nearly 90% of Nevada land is publicly owned and controlled by federal and state entities. In places like Lincoln County, an astonishing 98% of the land is federally owned. This creates severe artificial land scarcity, driving up the cost of the tiny fraction of private dirt actually available for purchase. You are moving to a state with millions of empty acres, yet you will still overpay for a cramped residential lot because the government refuses to release the land. Combine that spatial trap with a terrifying medical void. Recent state health data shows that nearly 70% of the Nevada population lives in federally designated primary care shortage areas. The blinding glare of the midday sun reflecting off a rusted Bureau of Land Management chain-link fence is a constant reminder that you are not welcome to expand. The sentiment on local Facebook community groups is grim, with one resident noting, "You can ride a dirt bike for 3 days in any direction without hitting a fence, but you have to wait 6 months to get a basic blood pressure prescription refilled." This is an environment that restricts both your physical footprint and your physical health. But while Nevada locks up its dirt, the next state on our list simply taxes you out of your own home. Number 8. Nebraska. The retirement magazines promise you a quiet, affordable prairie lifestyle where your dollar stretches further than anywhere on the coasts. The local tax assessor, however, has a completely different financial plan for your savings. Nebraska is quietly emptying out its rural counties, and the primary culprit is a municipal tax system that aggressively penalizes the people who refuse to leave. According to a 2025 analysis by the Tax Foundation, Nebraska property taxes have relentlessly climbed, forcing local mill rates into the stratosphere just to keep basic county services, like road maintenance and underfunded schools, on life support. Because the younger workforce has fled to larger cities, the heavy burden of funding this decaying infrastructure falls squarely on the shoulders of aging homeowners. This directly threatens your retirement portfolio, as you are forced to drain your pension just to rent your own paid-off property from the county. The bitter chill of a winter morning cuts right through your jacket as you walk down the driveway, only to pull a tax assessment out of the mailbox that just wiped out 2 months of fixed income budgeting. One veteran homeowner noted in a recent town hall thread, "They keep talking about tax relief in the capital, but my bill just jumped another 15% to pay for a school district that is half empty." It is an unwinnable mathematical equation. Number 7. Idaho. The glossy magazines rank it as a top-tier mountain escape for a quiet, affordable second act. But if you look past the stunning pine forests and the empty, winding two-lane highways, you will find a rural housing market that is quietly suffocating its oldest residents. Idaho is not empty because nobody wants to be there. It is empty because the locals can no longer afford to stay. A 2025 housing assessment by the Idaho Department of Commerce revealed a catastrophic mismatch between fixed incomes and soaring property valuations driven by out-of-state wealth. While wealthy remote workers buy up sprawling ranches, the National Housing Preservation Database reports that nearly 2,000 assisted and affordable rural housing units are set to expire in the next few years. When those protections vanish, those units convert to market rate, instantly pricing out the seniors who currently live there. The sheer anxiety of knowing your rent or property tax is tied to a luxury housing boom you never participated in is a direct threat to your financial survival. You thought you were moving to a secluded frontier, but you are actually stepping into a hyper-competitive real estate trap where the local diner waitress and the retired mechanic are being financially exiled. As the sentiment on a local community board recently highlighted, the mountains are beautiful, but you cannot eat the scenery when your property assessment jumps 40% in a single year. If your retirement portfolio is not built to absorb coastal pricing in a town with a single grocery store, this state will bleed your savings dry. Number 6. New Mexico. $50 million. That is the emergency lifeline the New Mexico Health Care Authority just had to inject into the Rural Health Care Delivery Fund in early 2026, simply to stop the entire rural medical network from collapsing overnight. People drive through the vast, sun-baked deserts of New Mexico and romanticize the isolation, completely unaware that the isolation is currently fatal. According to recent state filings, 30 different rural healthcare organizations across the state required this emergency bailout just to keep their doors open and their lights on. If you are a 65-year-old looking for a cheap, off-the-grid property in the high desert, you need to understand that affordable dirt comes with a terrifying medical void. Recent 2026 data from the National Rural Health Association shows that nearly 20% of rural Americans live in severe medical deserts. But in New Mexico, the crisis is amplified by vast distances and a severe lack of primary care providers. If you suffer a cardiac event on your affordable 10-acre plot, the paramedics are not just a few minutes away, they are entirely dependent on underfunded, volunteer networks that might take over an hour to reach you. The brutal reality of aging in this environment forces an inescapable question. Would you rather drain your retirement account to buy a smaller home near a reliable hospital, or live like a king on cheap land knowing an ambulance might never arrive in time? Let me know where you draw the line in the comments. The trade-off is not theoretical. It is a daily calculation of survival. Number 5. South Dakota. The sound of a buffering video call is rapidly replacing the sound of a doctor walking into the examination room. You might think moving to the empty, freezing plains of South Dakota offers a return to traditional, tight-knit community living, but the state government is quietly preparing for a future where physical doctors simply do not exist in rural zip codes. In their 2025 fiscal recovery plan, the South Dakota Bureau of Finance and Management allocated massive federal funding specifically for emergency medical telehealth services and telemedicine in nursing homes. They are doing this because the physical healthcare infrastructure is spread so impossibly thin that they have to rely on screens to diagnose emergencies. Imagine transferring your life savings to a remote prairie town, expecting quiet comfort, only to find out that your local nursing home relies on a tablet computer on a rolling cart to consult a physician located 300 miles away. The harsh, biting wind of a South Dakota winter is brutal enough, but the chill of realizing your emergency medical care is dependent on a stable broadband connection is entirely different. One exhausted resident on a regional Facebook group pointed out, "We have a brand new clinic building on Main Street, but half the time the only medical professional you see is on a computer monitor." This is not a peaceful retirement, it is an engineered medical exile. And while South Dakota attempts to digitize its doctors, the next state on our list had to use oil money just to stop the government from taxing seniors out of their homes. Number 4. North Dakota. A state swimming in billions of dollars of natural resource wealth should be a financial paradise for its aging residents. Instead, local municipal budgets grew so bloated that they began weaponizing property taxes against the very people who built the towns. North Dakota is vast, freezing, and fundamentally empty, yet, until very recently, rural homeowners were being crushed by escalating local tax assessments. The situation became so dire that in late 2025, the North Dakota Office of State Tax Commissioner had to tap into its massive legacy fund, built from oil revenues, to issue a $1,600 property tax credit just to stop the bleeding. Without this emergency intervention, thousands of seniors on fixed incomes were mathematically guaranteed to lose their homes. The brutal irony is that you played by the rules and paid taxes for 40 years, only to realize the system was designed to bleed your savings dry right when you were supposed to rest. Local governments, desperate to fund infrastructure for a population that was steadily declining, simply passed the bill down to the remaining retirees. The cold, mechanical hum of an oil derrick in the distance is a constant reminder of the wealth being extracted from the ground, while the people living above it struggle to balance their checkbooks. You might find a cheap house on the frozen prairie, but you are buying into a municipal system that views your retirement account as its personal emergency fund. Number 3. Montana. The smell of fresh pine and crisp mountain air is entirely ruined the moment you open the envelope from the county assessor. You spent 4 decades trading your physical labor for a pension, only to find out the local tax board views your life savings as a municipal bailout fund. Montana is heavily marketed as the ultimate rugged paradise for a quiet retirement, but the financial reality on the ground is aggressively hostile to anyone on a fixed income. According to 2025 filings from the Montana Department of Revenue, the state was forced to overhaul its entire property tax system after average homeowner bills jumped a staggering 21%. Wealthy out-of-state buyers flooded the valleys, paying cash for luxury ranches, which artificially inflated the assessed value of every modest, 30-year-old home around them. To combat the crisis, the state implemented a new tiered tax rate for 2025, but the damage to the middle class was already done. You might own a simple 3-bedroom house that you bought for $90,000 in 1998, but because a tech executive built a mansion down the road, the county now taxes you as if you were a millionaire. Your property equity is purely an illusion on paper, but the tax bill draining your retirement portfolio is a cold, hard monthly reality. The transition from a thriving local community to an empty playground for the ultra-rich happens quietly, one foreclosure at a time. And while Montana taxes its seniors to the breaking point, the state at number 2 tried to fix the problem and accidentally destroyed its own towns. Number 2, Wyoming. Everything you have heard so far is actually the manageable part. What comes next is where the math completely breaks down. Wyoming realized its aging residents were being crushed by escalating assessments. So in early 2025, the legislature passed a massive 25% property tax exemption for homeowners. On the surface, it sounded like a massive victory for retirees trying to survive on the frozen plains. But the brutal, hidden mechanism behind that tax cut is currently tearing rural Wyoming apart. According to recent 2025 state fiscal reports, that tax relief instantly wiped out roughly $250 million in local municipal revenue. You cannot remove $250 million from rural infrastructure without catastrophic consequences. Counties, like Carbon and Fremont, were immediately forced to slash budgets for fundamental survival services, including emergency road maintenance, senior centers, and local healthcare districts. You might save a few $100s on your tax bill this year, but the plow truck is no longer coming to clear the 3 feet of snow blocking your driveway, and the local clinic just cut its operating hours in half. It is a terrifying survival equation for an aging American. Would you rather keep an extra $1,000 in your pocket from a tax cut, or live in an isolated county that just defunded the local ambulance dispatch? Drop your choice below. The state is emptying out because you are forced to choose between financial ruin and physical danger. But even that impossible choice pales in comparison to the absolute demographic collapse happening at the top of our list. Number 1, Alaska. 12. That is the number of consecutive years this state has lost more residents than it gained. The tourism boards heavily promote Alaska as the ultimate, untouched American frontier, a place where true independence still exists. The macroeconomic reality, however, is that Alaska is a frozen economic containment zone that is currently bleeding its working-class population dry. According to the 2024 and 2025 demographic sweep by the Alaska Department of Labor, the state is experiencing an unprecedented outmigration crisis. The working-age population has steadily plummeted from 69% of the state in 2014 down to 65% today. People are not just leaving because of the dark, freezing winters. They are fleeing a broken economic model that relies almost entirely on volatile oil revenues to fund basic civilization. When oil prices fluctuate, the state budget collapses, creating severe fiscal uncertainty that completely deters new businesses from opening. If you move here to stretch your Social Security, you are stepping into a supply chain nightmare where a gallon of milk can cost 3 times the national average, simply because it had to be flown in on a cargo plane. The romanticized image of a lonely log cabin in the woods quickly loses its charm when you realize the nearest understaffed hospital is a 4-hour drive over roads that the state can no longer afford to pave. You are not buying freedom. You are buying a highly expensive, deeply isolated exile in a state that is slowly running out of the people needed to keep it functioning. The emptiness you see in these states is not a natural phenomenon. It is the documented, mathematical result of failed municipal policies, corporate extraction, and a healthcare system that simply abandoned the rural American map. If you are actively researching where to retire, or wondering if your current state is bleeding your savings dry, this channel publishes that exact macroeconomic research regularly, and it is completely free. Subscribe to protect your retirement. Today we covered the traps, but next week we are diving into the 5 states where your Social Security will actually stretch for decades without hidden taxes, and the number 1 spot will completely surprise you. Question everything, trust the data, stay aware,